Brenda Davidson, the iron-fisted president of the Ridgewood HOA, thought she had found her next easy target, a quiet man named Alex and his gentle rescue Rottweiler, Zeus. Citing safety concerns, she personally served Alex a notice. He had 30 days to get rid of his dog, or she would use fines and liens to take his home. To Brenda, it was a simple act of power. She was removing an undesirable animal and putting another resident in their place. She made a fatal error. She never once asked what Alex did for a living. He wasn't just a quiet dog owner. He was Alex Riley, a senior litigator for one of the most powerful law firms in the state. A man who specializes in finding procedural errors and legally dismantling bullies in the courtroom. Brenda thought she was starting a simple HOA violation proceeding. She had no idea she had just voluntarily entered a legal war with a master of the craft, and he was about to use his entire professional arsenal to save his dog and burn her petty kingdom to the ground. Before we go deeper into this story, please do make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps us create more stories of justice just like this one. Now let's get back to the story. The war Brenda Davidson had just declared on Alex Riley didn't start with shouting or arguments. It started quietly, on a perfect Thursday afternoon, under a warm summer sun. Alex was walking Zeus through the community park, enjoying the peace he'd moved to this neighborhood for. Zeus, his big, gentle Rottweiler, was trotting happily beside him, his tail wagging. For Alex, these walks were a sanctuary, a quiet escape from the high-stakes pressure of his job. That sanctuary was about to be invaded. He saw her approaching from across the green lawn, Brenda Davidson. She moved with an unnerving sense of purpose, her posture rigid, a clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alex, so good to see you," she said, her voice sickly sweet. She looked down at Zeus with a flicker of distaste. "I need to speak with you about an urgent matter regarding your animal." She didn't wait for a reply. For the safety of the community's children, the board has proposed an emergency amendment to the bylaws. We're banning certain aggressive breeds. She paused for dramatic effect. And Rottweilers are at the top of the list. She slid a single sheet of paper from her clipboard and handed it to him. The paper felt flimsy, but the words printed on it were heavy. It was an official notice. It stated he had 30 days to rehome his animal. If he failed to comply, he would face escalating daily fines and eventually a forced lien on his property. Alex read the words, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He looked down at Zeus, who nudged his hand, oblivious. This dog was his family. The idea of giving him up was unthinkable. He okayed back up at Brenda, but the emotional man was gone. The litigator had taken his place. His voice was calm, level, and dangerously precise. "I see," he said slowly. "Could you provide me with a copy of the minutes from the board meeting where this was discussed and voted upon?" Brenda's smile became a smug smirk. She had expected anger, pleading, maybe even tears. This calm questioning was an annoyance she could easily swat away. "It was a unanimous decision by the board," she chirped. "You'll be formally notified of the upcoming community ratification meeting. Have a wonderful day." She turned and walked away, her back straight, confident she had already won. She had no idea she had just handed a loaded weapon to the one man in the neighborhood who knew exactly how to use it against her. As Brenda disappeared from view, Alex stood frozen for a moment, the flimsy notice crinkling in his fist. Her smug confidence echoed in his ears. It wasn't just an attack on his dog, it was a flagrant abuse of power, and she felt completely untouchable. He walked home, Zeus trotting beside him, unaware of the battle that had just begun. The legal part of his brain was already whirring, dissecting Brenda's words, searching for the weak points he knew had to be there. Later that evening, Alex sat on his front porch, reading the notice again under the dim light. The official-looking letterhead couldn't hide the ugliness of the words. "That's a good dog you've got there." The voice was soft. Alex looked up to see an older gentleman standing by his walkway. It was his neighbor, Mr. Gable. "He is," Alex said, managing a small smile. "He's my best friend." Mr. Gable nodded, his eyes kind. He glanced at the paper in Alex's hand, and his expression hardened slightly. Let me guess. A friendly notice from President Brenda? Alex was surprised. You know about this? Son, I know everything, Mr. Gable said, stepping closer and lowering his voice. I was on the HOA board with her for 2 years. I quit because I couldn't stand her dictatorship. He leaned against the porch railing. She runs this place like her own little kingdom. She finds someone she doesn't like and she finds a rule to use against them. Or she just makes one up. This confirmed everything Alex suspected. She mentioned a unanimous board vote, Alex said, his voice now sharp with focus. Mr. Gable let out a short, bitter laugh. The board is supposed to have 5 members. 3 of us quit. Her unanimous vote was probably just her and her one friend, which doesn't make a quorum. It's not legal. A spark of excitement cut through Alex's anger. This was it. The first crack in her armor. Mr. Gable looked Alex straight in the eye. She's gotten away with it for too long. People are afraid of her. But you don't seem afraid. He took a deep breath. If you're going to fight her, I want to help. He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. I have records, all of them. Mr. Gable's last words hung in the evening air. I have records, all of them. For Alex, it was like a floodlight turning on in a dark room. This wasn't just a neighborly complaint anymore. It was a case. And now he had a star witness and a mountain of evidence waiting for him. He thanked Mr. Gable, his mind already racing. The time for feeling angry was over. It was time to work. Alex retreated to his home office. This was his real battlefield. The room was clean, organized, and quiet. He sat in his leather chair, pulled up a blank document on his monitor, and the concerned dog owner vanished. The litigator took his place. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He wasn't writing an angry email. He was drafting a formal official request for documents, a letter so dense with long, gal language, it would give a normal person a headache. It was the first shot in a war Brenda didn't even know she was in. The letter was addressed to the HOA Board of Directors. Citing specific articles from the HOA's own governing documents, it demanded complete, unredacted copies of everything. Meeting minutes for the last 2 years, the current annual budget, a detailed list of all fines issued to homeowners, and most importantly, the specific minutes from the so-called unanimous vote to ban Zeus's breed. He gave them a firm deadline to comply, 10 business days. He printed it, signed it, and sent it via certified mail the next morning. A few days later, Brenda found the letter in the HOA's P.O. box. She read it, a small, amused smile on her face. She saw the fancy legal words, but all she saw was a desperate resident trying to act tough, an empty threat. She scoffed, crumpled the letter, and tossed it in the bin. Later that day, she had her secretary send Alex a dismissive, 1-paragraph email. Attached was a single useless page, a summary of an old community newsletter with most of the text blacked out. Sitting in his office, Alex stared at the redacted document on his screen. Brenda thought she had shut him down. Instead, she had just handed him his first legal victory, failure to comply, and it was going to be the first of many mistakes she would make. Brenda's dismissive email was the biggest gift she could have given him. Alex stared at the screen, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. This single act of arrogance proved contempt for the rules. It was all the ammunition he needed. He saved a copy of the email, printed it out, and immediately called Mr. Gable. An hour later, they were sitting at Mr. Gable's kitchen table. The air was thick with purpose. Between them sat a simple, thick binder. It was Mr. Gable's secret weapon, filled with years of meticulously organized documents. She thinks she's a queen, but every kingdom has rules, Mr. Gable said, pushing the binder toward Alex. The original covenants are in the first tab. Alex opened the binder. The pages were crisp, the text clear. He scanned through the articles, his trained eyes absorbing the legal jargon instantly. He flipped past sections on lawn care and holiday decorations. Then he stopped. His finger rested on a single paragraph in Article 10, amending the covenants. Here it is, Alex said, his voice low and intense. The rule was crystal clear. Any change to the bylaws didn't just need a board vote. It required a 2/3 vote from the entire community at an annual meeting. Brenda's emergency amendment wasn't just improper, it was completely illegal. It was the smoking gun. "It gets worse," Mr. Gable said, flipping to a section filled with financial statements. He pointed to a recurring payment, a huge sum paid every month to a company called Evergreen Landscaping. "I did some digging a while back," Mr. Gable explained. "Evergreen Landscaping is owned by Brenda's brother-in-law." The pieces clicked into place in Alex's mind. It all made sense now. The sudden, aggressive push to ban his dog wasn't really about Zeus at all. It was a distraction, a smokescreen. Brenda was creating a villain, a dangerous dog, to get everyone angry and emotional. She wanted the community fighting over pets so they wouldn't look too closely at the upcoming budget report, where she was secretly funneling their money to her own family. She wasn't just a bully, she was a thief, and her little kingdom was about to come crashing down. Alex left Mr. Gable's house with a folder full of evidence and a clear plan of attack. He now knew Brenda wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was a criminal, and he was going to expose her. In the days that followed, Alex worked quietly, building his case, but his silence was making Brenda nervous. She was used to people arguing or giving up. This calm, methodical resistance was new, and she didn't like it. She saw him talking to Mr. Gable in the park. She noticed other neighbors giving him friendly waves. She felt her absolute control begin to slip. A cornered animal is a dangerous one. Brenda, feeling threatened, decided she needed to do something drastic to put Alex back in his place before the big community meeting. She needed to crush him. A few days later, a thick envelope appeared in Alex's mailbox. It wasn't a friendly letter. It was a formal invoice, stamped in bright red ink with the words, "Final Notice." Brenda had fined him $500. The charge was for destruction of community property. It claimed that his large, uncontrolled animal had dug up and ruined the prize-winning petunias by the community entrance. Alex read the notice and almost laughed. He and Zeus never even walked in that direction. He knew for a fact those flower beds were perfectly fine. It was a complete, clumsy lie. The fine came with a demand for immediate payment well before the scheduled community meeting. The threat was clear. If he didn't pay, the HOA would place a lien on his home. Brenda's plan was simple and vicious. She wanted to stand up at that meeting and discredit him, painting him as a deadbeat who damaged property and refused to pay his debts. She thought she was setting the perfect trap. Alex carefully placed the fraudulent fine into his evidence folder. It was the final straw, the last perfect piece of proof he needed. Brenda thought she was building his cage. In reality, she had just handed him the key to hers. The fraudulent fine was the last piece of the puzzle. It was Brenda's final, arrogant mistake, and it sealed her fate. With this document, Alex didn't just have proof of her corruption. He had undeniable proof of targeted harassment. The next 2 days were quiet. From the outside, nothing in Alex's house seemed out of the ordinary. But inside his home office, a storm was gathering. Alex worked with the intense focus of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. He took all the evidence, the original bylaws, Brenda's illegal notices, the fraudulent landscaping invoices, and the sworn statements from other residents Mr. Gable had helped him contact, and he wove them together. He created a simple, clear timeline that showed Brenda's pattern of abuse. He built a presentation that was so easy to understand, a child could see the truth. This wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about total, undeniable victory. He spent hours at his printer, creating dozens of identical packets. Each one was a neat, stapled bundle of evidence, a perfect copy of the case he had built against her. There would be one for every resident at the meeting. No one would be left in the dark. Everyone would see exactly what their HOA president had been doing. On the morning of the meeting, with the packets stacked neatly in a box by his door, Alex performed his final move. He sent one last email to Brenda and the HOA board. The email was polite, professional, and short. It simply confirmed his attendance at the meeting that evening. He wrote that he looked forward to a productive discussion regarding the proposed amendment and other pressing community matters. Brenda read the email and smiled. She thought he was walking right into her trap. She had no idea he was the one who had set the trap, and she was the one about to walk right into it. The war was over. All that was left was the final battle. That evening, the Ridgewood Coincidental Nighty Hall was packed. The air was stuffy and thick with tension. Most people were there because of the controversy Brenda had stirred up about Alex's dog. Brenda stood at the podium, basking in the attention. This was her stage. She tapped the microphone and a high-pitched squeal silenced the room. She began a long, dramatic speech, her voice filled with fake concern. She talked about protecting our children and ensuring our safety. She painted a picture of a peaceful community threatened by dangerous animals. Finally, she looked directly at Alex, who was sitting quietly in the back row. A cruel, triumphant smile touched her lips. "And so," she announced, "we will now vote to ratify the emergency bylaw to ban aggressive breeds from our community." This was it. Her moment of victory. Then a calm voice cut through the room. "Point of order, Madam President." Alex stood up. He wasn't angry or shouting. He was perfectly composed. Brenda's face tightened. "You are out of order, Mr. Riley. We are holding a vote." "Actually," Alex said, his voice clear and steady, carrying easily through the silent hall, "according to Article 3, Section 4 of our own governing documents, any member may address the board before a vote is held." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brenda's smile vanished. He had just corrected her, using her own rules. Alex walked slowly to the front of the room, holding a single piece of paper. He stood next to the podium, but he didn't look at Brenda. He looked at his neighbors. "Good evening, everyone," he said. "For those who don't know me, my name is Alex Riley." People turned to stare at Brenda, whose face had gone pale. She wasn't dealing with a simple resident anymore. "The vote we are being asked to take tonight," Alex continued, his voice like steel, "is illegal. Our covenants clearly state that any amendment requires a 2/3 vote of the entire community, not just a secret meeting by a board that doesn't even have enough members to legally operate." He held up the paper. It was a copy of the bylaw he'd found with Mr. Gable. "Our president knowingly violated the oath she took to uphold these rules." Before Brenda could even respond, Alex turned to Mr. Gable, who was standing by the door with a box. "Mr. Gable, if you would." Mr. Gable nodded and began moving through the aisles, handing one of Alex's evidence packets to every single resident. A quiet rustling filled the room as people opened the files. On the projector screen behind the podium, Alex displayed his next slide. It was a copy of the $500 fine Brenda had given him for property damage. "This is a fraudulent fine our president issued to me just this week," Alex said calmly. "An attempt to harass and discredit me before this meeting." He clicked to the next slide. It was the landscaping invoices. "And these," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "are the invoices showing where your HOA fees have been going. To a landscaping company owned by Brenda's own brother-in-law, charging us 3 times the normal rate." A collective gasp went through the room. People looked down at the proof in their hands, then up at the screen, then at Brenda with open disgust. The whispers turned into angry murmurs. Alex delivered the final blow. "This is no longer just an HOA matter," he announced. "This morning, on behalf of 15 of your neighbors, I filed a legal motion for an emergency, independent audit of this HOA's finances. I have also submitted the paperwork to trigger an immediate recall vote for the presidency." Brenda stood there frozen, her face as white as a sheet. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The room erupted. People were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Her power was gone. Her reign was over. The story of what happened that night spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Brenda resigned in disgrace the next day, just before the audit began. She and her family are now facing a lawsuit from the HOA. A week later, Alex was walking Zeus on a perfect quiet afternoon. But something was different. Neighbors smiled as he passed. People stopped to say hello, to thank him, to pet Zeus on the head. The peace he had moved here for wasn't something he found by avoiding conflict. It was something he had to fight for. And now, walking with his best friend in his safe, quiet neighborhood, he had finally won it for everyone.